10. All right. So chapter 10, you actually really gonna like because A, I actually make it easier than 8 and 9, and B is honestly just a combination of 8 and 9. Okay, so here, chapter 10 is all about two sample procedures. So, what if instead of taking one sample, we're trying to compare two different samples that we took, two different medications, two different something to find out which one is more effective? Okay, so that's everything that we're going to be doing in chapter 10. And again, the nice thing is that process is still going to be that four-step process. The only difference being you have to say that they're both random. They both have to be normal. They both have to meet the 10% condition. So, I mean, it is a little bit more just because you have to be noting each of those conditions for both things. But again, you know those conditions. You've been doing it for like what? Almost 2 months now. So, yeah. So again, I think this is a very inherently easy chapter for kids because it's every skill you already know how to do. Okay. So I say let's actually just dive right in and start practicing. So the elderly fear crime more than younger people, even though they're less likely to be victims to crime. One study recruited separate random samples of 56 black women and 63 black men over the age of 65 from Atlantic City, New Jersey. Of the women, 27 said they felt vulnerable to crime. 46 of the men said this. Construct and interpret a 90% confidence interval for the difference in the proportions of men and women who feel vulnerable to crime. So once again, you see construct and interpret. What does that mean that we have to do? Full four-step process. And again, the beautiful thing is the four-step process is the same as it's been for the previous two chapters now. So if you've been good at 8 and 9, you're going to be really good at 10. So state step, I'm guessing you know where this is headed, right? Instead of one sample, this is two sample. And is it a Z or a T? Z because it's for a proportion. Now this time it's not just for a proportion, it's for a difference in proportions. Oh, come on. So this is a two sample Z interval, and we're using it for a difference of proportions. Now you're also going to notice in this chapter we blend together a lot. Don't confidence intervals and hypothesis tests like basically aren't they the same process? So actually this chapter we blend everything together. So do notice we're going back to confidence intervals today. Tomorrow we're going to jump right back into hypothesis testing. For confidence intervals, wasn't this it? There was nothing else here for the C step, right? So here, confidence intervals, that was it. You just have to name it, okay? And then we move right along. Plan. Again, same three steps as all we've been doing. The thing to be careful for is don't you have to show that both samples meet all of these criteria, right? So here we need we need uh, recruited separate random samples because he did note that both of them were random. So in some way, shape, or form here, I used plural as samples. You could use the word both samples were random. Just in some way, shape, or form, make sure you're referencing that both of them met that randomness condition. Normality for proportions. What do we check for? Successes and failures. And again, in this case, don't we need to check that for both of these groups, right? Both of these groups need at least 10 successes and failures. Oh, here we go. Correct. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. So we can see the successes. Where did the failures come from? How did I get those? Yeah, that's just like the sample size minus the successes, right? Just the others. So that's where those other numbers are coming from, if you're curious. And what's the last condition? independent. So really what we need is both of these samples have to be less than 10% of their respective populations, right? The other little added piece to that is also shouldn't our samples be independent from each other as well? So here there is a little bit more to note here because both of them have to meet that 10% condition, and you also have to be able to believe that they're independent from each other. Could you do me a favor and help me passing stuff back? Yeah, that'd be lovely. I realize how much I've been accumulating again. Oopsie. Yes. All right. Now, in the do step, so this is where you're going to love me slash hate me. Um, so some of you have already heard me talking about this, okay? So for the past 2 chapters in the do step, I've been having you show me the setup of your interval, setup of your statistic, all that jazz, right? Now, technically on the AP exam, when it's an FRQ, if you have given the process a proper name, you don't have to show anything in this step. All you have to do is show the product of what the calculator gives you. You don't actually have to do any math here if you've given it a proper name. So that's why it maybe seemed weird to you from day one. I spent so much time getting you to state this because as long as you say this, you don't have to show the math anymore, okay? Now, the reason I've been making you do it all along is because when it pops up on multiple choice, you have to understand what those things are and how to construct them, but you don't have to do it in the middle of the 4-step process anymore. Okay, honestly, you can just write down whatever the calculator gives you. So, let's go and find which program the calculator is going to need. So, if we go into our list now, okay, now probably the ones versus twos are making more sense to you, right? Now that you're seeing the chapter that we're in. Now when we're dealing with 2 sample procedures, wouldn't it obviously be a 2 that we're looking for, right? Same rule applies. If it's for a proportion, it absolutely has to say proportion, okay? So we're looking for the word proportion. We need a 2 because it's 2 sample. And isn't this a Z interval, right? So let's start scanning. To prop, oh, but it's a test, not an interval. 2, but that's a sample, not a proportion. Oh, here we go. Doesn't this have every component that we need? It says it's for a proportion, 2 sample. We are interested in doing a Z interval. Okay, so in this chapter, the first one we're going to learn is this B command. Now, there is a little bit more that goes into it because obviously we have 2 samples of data here. So basically, this is asking for the successes and failures of one of your groups. So here it talks about 27 out of 56 women said that they felt vulnerable to crime. And then it said 46 out of 63 men said that they felt vulnerable to crime. So that's just the successes in total of both of your groups that you're talking about. And then what level of confidence do they want from us? Don't they just want 90% confidence? And again, the do step is honestly just writing this down. That's all you have to do now for your do step. Isn't that lovely? One thing that I would like us to go back and do though, so when you're typing in this program, okay, when you're typing it in, is going to take the first thing minus the second thing as it's constructing this interval. So what I do encourage you to do is go back here. Once you know the way that you've typed it in, it takes the first thing minus the second thing. So this difference is going to be women minus the men, right? The way that we set this up. So that is a good clarification thing to do, because obviously the interval would be opposite in sign if you subtracted the other way. Does that make sense to everybody? It's just a good clarification to make for them that this is the difference we're doing. We're doing women minus men in this case. It's going to take the first thing minus the second thing you type in. Now, I know it's been a little while since we've done this. How do we conclude for an interval? Does anybody remember? What? Yeah. We're 90% confident that the interval from this to this contains the, wait for it, contains the difference in the proportions of men and women who feel vulnerable to crime, right? So exactly the same deal that I taught you to do back in chapter 8. Yeah. Mhm. Oh, whoa, whoa. I think that was 63. It's the totals, not the failures, that you're putting, and it's the total. Is that? Oh, was it kicking out an error for you? That's why, because the ends are the totals. All right. So, does our interval give convincing evidence of a difference between the proportions of men, or that there's a difference in proportion of men and women who feel vulnerable to crime? So, what value would represent no difference? 0. Okay. So honestly, this whole chapter, 0 is the magic number. This whole chapter is based on differences, and no difference would be 0, right? Is everybody okay with that? Because that's literally going to be this entire chapter. All right. So 0 means no difference. Well, is 0 in the interval? No. So since 0 is not present, isn't that implying that there definitely is a difference here, right? We are confident that there's a difference here because 0 is not present in the interval. All right. And then part C, I put in a nice little throwback to chapter 4 because I thought it'd be fun. Can you generalize your findings of this study to all men and women in the United States? Can we generalize this to everyone? No. Why? Yes, because it was specifically black men and women in a particular city, right? Wasn't this in a very particular city down in Georgia or in Atlanta, right? So no, so their sampling was way too specific in order to generalize that big, right? Oh, oh. Not really. Geographically, I was way off. But no, so our sample is way too specific to make that level of a generalization, right? The population they were sampling from was honestly only black men and women from that particular city. All right. Going online. So are teens or adults more likely to go online daily? The Pew Internet and American Life Project asked a random sample of 800 teens and a separate random sample of 2,253 adults how often they use the internet. In these two surveys, 63% of teens and 68% of adults said they go online every day. Construction interpreted a 95% confidence interval for the difference between the proportion of teens and adults that go online every day. So again, how would we name this thing now that we have two samples? Do be careful. This is an interval, not a test. So do be careful about that. That here they're telling us we're constructing and interpreting an interval. All right. Plan step. Did they say these were both random? Separate random samples of teens and adults. Now this one I put in here just to be a little bit different. Because in this case, did they actually give us the number of successes for these? No, they gave us the proportion of successes. So if for normality, if I need to count the successes and failures, how do I find my successes? Yes. So I would take 800 times 0.63 and then 800 times 0.37 to get the successes and failures for the teens. And then when I do the same thing for the adults, but using the 68%, so 0.68 times 2,253, okay, is going to give 1,532.04 successes. And if I multiply it by 0.32, gives me 720.96 failures. And then what do we say about all four of those values? All, or at least 10. So just make sure I'm not going too quickly. Does everybody get how I got those values? Is everybody good with that? Beautiful. And independence, what do we check for independence? Less than 10%. So both of these samples should be less than 10% of their respective population of teens and adults, right? And what's the other component to that? It's also reasonable they're independent from each other. All right. And again, beautiful thing about our do step is we don't have to worry about the construct anymore, right? All we have to do is make sure we've named it and that we know which program to use, and then just type in all that information, all right? And what program did we use in the first one? What? B, yeah. Because we needed it to say proportion is two samples and we are making a Z interval. Another reason I put this one specifically on here is to show you the little eccentricities of this program. So for the teens, okay, how many successes were there again? 504. 504 out of 800 successes. How about for the adults? I know there were 2,253 total. How many of those were successes? The program will freak out at you if you try to put a decimal in there. Okay, so you do have to round to the nearest person when you're doing this because it will legitimately freak out at you and not run if you try to put a decimal here. In this case, it's the closest. What? Oh, I would say no. That's only when we're dealing with sample size as a whole. And then was it 95 confidence this time? Yeah. All right. Boom. And again, the nice thing is all you have to write down is this. Yeah, it would not take kindly to that. And of course, how do we interpret this? Yeah, we're 95% confident that that interval contains the true difference, and then didn't I just copy paste whatever the prompt said? And then the other thing, remember I said it is kind of a good idea to go back and give some clarification. So for this interval, now that we've typed it in, remember I said it'll construct it using the first thing minus the second thing. So when you're talking about the difference, I would go back, teens minus adults. Just give the clarification which way you're setting up your interval. Okay. And again, that really comes from just the way you type it into the calculator. So that's why it's the last thing I do, because it depends on how you type the information in. Will depend how it does that. Yes. It'll always take 1 minus 2. Yeah. So given that this is our interval, does it give evidence that there's a difference? I think so. Is 0 in here? No, it's not. So if 0 isn't there, that does mean we believe there's a difference, right? Whenever 0 is not included, it means that we do believe that there's a difference. now let's go back to review another thing from chapter 8. So remember the idea of what does that 95 actually really mean in and of itself? We talked about that quite a bit, the other way to interpret this. So in the conclusion, we're always interpreting the interval. What do we want to interpret? What is this 95? Does anybody remember how to start that off? Yes. So that 95 itself is, what if we did this many times? What if we followed the sampling procedure many times, made many intervals? Wouldn't we expect 95% of them to contain the true difference? Yes. So remember, that is what this is. And if you remember in that chapter 8 packet, wasn't that actually a very, very frequent multiple choice question on the AP exam? There were a lot of those in that packet. Then another thing that we talked about back in chapter 8 was manipulating the size of our interval. What if we used 98% confidence instead of 95? If we need more confidence, what happens to the interval? It gets bigger. If we're more confident that we've caught it, wouldn't that mean that we had to use more values to gain that confidence, right? The more values we have, the more confident we are that we've actually caught it. So yeah, so this would result in a wider one. The proportion of drivers who use seatbelts depends on things like age. Young people are more likely to go unbelted, and gender. Women are more likely to use seatbelts. It also depends on local law. In New York City, police can stop a driver who is not belted. In Boston, at the same time as the study, police could cite a driver for not wearing a seatbelt only if the driver had been stopped for some other violation. Here are the data from observing random samples of female and Hispanic drivers. So, first, this scenario here, is this an experiment or is this an observational study? Another chapter 4 throwback. Observational study. Why? We did not impose a treatment on them, right? We're merely looking at data. We're looking at what happened. We didn't impose a treatment trying to tell these individuals, you need to drive unbelted and you need to drive belted, right? We literally just looked at data without imposing a treatment on these individuals. All right, now, I will give you guys the choice. Do you feel like you need a third one of these, or do you feel like you get it from the two that we did? You've got it from the two. It's okay if I skip this. All right. I figured you guys were probably okay with that. One thing I want to talk about though is the other idea. So the other way we can manipulate the size of these intervals is sample size, right? So what if I used bigger samples of men and women? What would happen to my interval then? It gets smaller. Why? Because a bigger sample size means less variability. Yeah, more people in the middle, right? So larger sample sizes mean less variability, which means a smaller interval. Now, one thing that is very important that we do spend a little bit of time on, though, okay? So I said the only reason I made you do that do step for so long is because I need you ready for the multiple choice when it pops up, because I guarantee you it will be one of your multiple choice questions, or even two some years, okay? So I do need you with the ability to construct these things. I just need you only to be able to do that in a multiple choice setting. I don't need you to do it as an FRQ anymore. So I do have 2 examples here practicing what that can look like. And again, this is why I don't make you do it as an FAQ anymore, because doesn't this look like a monster to have to try to create? That's a beast. You don't want to do that every time. So again, we're just going to focus on this as a multiple choice practice. So if you would get this out, please. Yours are yellow though. Because now we're going to learn how to use more of this page, okay, to do these constructions. Would you like to borrow one? You're welcome. All right, so when this pops up as multiple choice, we need to be familiar with even more of this page now. So 35 people from a random sample of 125 workers in Company A admitted using sick days when they weren't really ill. 17 employees from a random sample of 68 workers from Company B admitted that they had used sick leave when they weren't ill. A 95% confidence interval for the difference in proportions of workers at the 2 companies who admit to using sick leave when they weren't ill is boom. All right. So let's siphon through how to do this, okay? So we're talking about the difference in proportions, okay? So Company A, 35 out of 125 said that they had done that. So 25% said they had. At Company B, 17 out of 68, which is 25%. So does that make sense where this 3% is coming from? Is everybody seeing that? That's honestly just a difference between the 2 proportions if you turn them into fractions. Okay. Is everybody with me on that? Yes. Okay. So that is all that 3% is. If you turn both of those into decimals, then that's the difference between your 2 samples. Okay. Everyone with me there? Love it. Now let's talk about the real issue here, that margin of error, okay? Now one of them, right off the bat, I think you can see a glaring mistake. Which one doesn't look right completely from the get-go? A. Why? It doesn't have the critical value, right? A is missing that critical value. So I'm going to rule out A right away, okay? It's missing a piece of itself, right? And I love where Kayla's at. All right. So if we want this value, where do we go to get that value? Where Kayla is. We go back to that table B, right? Remember, the only table I've ever asked you to use is the one that specifically references confidence level, right? This one says that we want 95. What number is associated with 95? 1.96. There go 2 more answer choices. Now let's talk about the hardest part. And the reason I don't make you do this every single time anymore, because you can see this would actually take a while. If we go back to this page, up to this point, we've been dealing with, I know it's hard to see. Sorry, it's up here. Single sample. Now what are we looking at? 2 sample. Right? So now we're transitioning when we're trying to construct the standard error or the standard deviation. Now we have to construct it using these methods down here. Okay? So if you notice, don't these look very similar to this setup right here? Yes. Your sample proportion and its opposite divided by sample size, then add it to the other one, and then square root it. Okay? So, looking at this, which one of these did that? We had a 28% and a 25%. Which one of these uses those values with their opposites divided by the sample size? B. All right, next one. Independent random samples of 100 luxury cars and 250 non-luxury cars in a certain city are examined to see if they have bumper stickers. Of the 250 non-luxury cars, 125 have bumper stickers. And of the 100 luxury, 30 have bumper stickers. Which of the following is a 90% confidence interval for the difference of the proportion of non-luxury cars with bumper stickers and the proportion of luxury cars with bumper stickers? So let's see what we have. So, first of all, this beginning piece is the difference in our proportions. For luxury, 125 out of 250. Isn't that half? Isn't that 0.5? 30 out of 100, isn't that 30%, zero point 0.3? So, does it make sense where this zero point 0.5 minus zero point 0.3 came from? Is everybody okay with where that came from, where that is? Honestly, though, did it really matter even? I'd say no. Why not? Because they're all the same anyway, right? But it is good to have that awareness, though, where those came from. Again, those are honestly just your sample proportions subtracted, the difference of them. Now, let's dive into the rest, okay? So here, now we need that critical value. Again, where do we get that critical value from? Where Kayla went. So we look at the confidence level. This time, isn't it 90? Yes. Which one is associated with 90? 1.645. You're gone, and you're gone. All right, now, actually, I mean, looking at it this way, doesn't only one of them even look right? Which is the only one that really looks right? A. Now, even though that's the only one that even looks relatively close to what we're looking for, let's still make sure that the pieces are fitting together right. Didn't one of our samples have half of them and its opposite? And its sample size was 250. The other one actually did have a 30% success rate, its opposite, divided by its sample size. So A really does fit, right? So again, I hope, do you guys feel comfortable on multiple choice you can do this, even if I don't make you do it every single FAQ anymore? Multiple choice wise, do you feel confident you could pick out the right answer? Excellent. All right. Yes. Oh no. What? That's rude. Oh, yeah. Wait, did you just end a pigeon blowing up? Oh. Oh, whoopsie. Oh, that's my bad. Yeah, I just probably didn't see that. If you want to like circle that for me and then turn it back in, I will fix that for you. I'm sorry. You know, every time kids talk about that, it makes me tempted. What if I have a bonfire with all of your tests? Like at the celebration at the end, like, okay, bye. Yeah, I actually do it. I feel like that's a fire code issue. Okay, so kids always talk about how they like burn their homework at the end of the year. What if teachers, we get to have a bonfire and burn all of your tests? No, again, fire code violation. Oh yeah, because I mean, all of our tests should be taken by that point, right? Was I right? Chapter 10, pretty doable. Every time I do this now, every time I notice that. So it's either two or three that it wipes out. Well, I mean, a good strategy really is like, first of all, these are all the same, so you really don't even have to have them as a consideration, right? And then yeah, then I would focus on this piece. What can I rule out because of that, and then just look at what's left.
No way. That was gross. I kept
Yeah.
all my pictures. This one needs to go to Miss H though.
Did, did that just happen?
I never showed it to Miss Cage, but I kept one. My whole biology notebook is yours.
Oh, but it'll hurt me because I love stats so
My
much.
notes.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm keeping all my notes.
Good. And all the authentic AP examples, like all the colorful packets.
The multiple choice.
Like these. Please don't burn these. Save these with your note packet.
They might be mixed in with my. I have a pile. They might be mixed in. I'll try to take them out.
Okay.
I have a whole.
Yes.
It's just a bunch of homework in the corner of my room.
See, homework, I'm honestly fine. Like, even before the AP exam, if you guys load the homework, that's not what I'm concerned about. It's, I would make sure you have your notes, have these, the practice tests, like, all the colorful stuff is actually the really good stuff.
After the end of the year, anyway.
Oh, true.
I can't wait until after the AP test when I can finally stop taking 3 notebooks all around. 3 binders all around. My
I,
backpack feels so light.
I can't wait till after the AP exam when we get to go on Twitter and see everyone making fun of it. That's the best.
I love those.
Yes. Okay, so there are some ridiculous things. Like last year, even though I'm not supposed to know this, but kids talk about it. Apparently, one of the multiple choice was setting up an experiment. The experiment that they set up was taking people's arms, spraying them with 2 different bug sprays, making them put their arms in a box with a ton of bugs, and counting how many bites they got to see which repellent was more effective. It's the, like, who comes up with that?
All these experiments.
It was an experiment. You're right. That was not an observational study.
When I took the PSAT last year, there was one about like tomatoes and like boxes. I remember there was one about how this lady. It was in the English section. This lady made a bookstore because her husband left her.
Oh.
She lived her life controlling this bookstore.
Oh. Calc had one last year. The cooling rate of a potato. wait, wait, you were in Calc last year? Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, you were one of LaRude's. I love her so much. What?
All my friends love
Oh
her,
yeah.
and I'm like, you should.
I mean, you really can't not love LaRude. If you don't love her, you're not human. That's basically how it
Her
goes.
own time was just calculus.
Well, because she only teaches calculus, so there is nothing else for her to do during out
I
time.
remember one time a while ago she spelled it Cal and then she capitalized kill us.
I saw that.
The kill
Does she only
part.
have like 3 hours? Because she has 2 kills.
She has 2 and 2, and then her last hour is an intervention hour for geometry.
Oh.
So
What does she do?
she
She teaches geometry.
teaches a geometry intervention. We call it academic labs. Our students.
To tell you to not take geometry.
No. No, so it's for students who struggle in geometry. They actually get a whole second period of her helping them through those skills.
Ugh.
So it's like a second hour of
I
it.
wish I had a schedule for that. I have friends who are like, I can't even get health and gym and I don't have time. Because we do band all 4 years and then
Oh yeah.
I didn't qualify, so I had to drop a class.
Oh,
Math, sadly.
sad. But at least you're ending with stats.
Yeah,
It's a
that's
good
why
way to end.
I'm
It is a good way to
My
end.
sister, because she's going to be a freshman next year, okay, you have to start, because we're on the same, like,
Same track.
1 year ahead, I think. So she's doing geometry, I think it's each first.
Geometry, algebra 2.
To pre-calc, I told her to do college algebra because pre-calc killed me, and then
Stats. Yeah.
I took AP stats because all my friends took AP stats in previous years. 2 years ago, I had Maddie Griffin. Last year, I
Yes.
had
Sam.
And then this year,
she
it's gonna be
snapped me randomly like 2 days ago a picture of my 5th grade like yearbook photo. Apparently, we were in it was in 5th grade. It was in middle school because we were in this like girls engineering math and science club together. And all of a sudden, she was like, "Did you realize like we were in that together?" And then we like didn't know each other, but now we know each other because we were in band together. And I was like, she blew my mind.
I know a lot of people in your AP stats 2 years ago. Because I also know like Mike Hampton.
Oh my God, Mike.
There's somebody else.
Oh my God. There are no words to describe that child.
I still friends with him on Facebook, and I'm confused half the time.
Oh yeah, his statuses, I don't even know.
I don't know what they mean.
One time I walked in to him literally laying across from my desk, screaming at the top of his lungs. Like I didn't know what to do walking into that.
I definitely believe it.
Like I have a senior who looks like they're having like either the biggest emotional break I've ever seen or like a tantrum like a 2-year-old.
Why not
I wasn't
both?
sure which one it was.
Honestly, I have both on a daily. Most of mine aren't. It's pretty funny. I don't. That'd be nice though. At first, I thought you were ordering pizza, and I'm like,
Me?
I said,
No.
wait.
Darn it, pizza
I
sounds
have
really good now.
Okay, I have this like crazy expensive planner that I gifted myself with. And then when I got it, there was an extra page added into it that was upside down. So I could have just ripped it out and it would have been totally like normal because it was an extra page. But I emailed them a picture and I was like, hey, this is in here. So now I have $15 of store credit and I want to use it
Oh.
to buy a new cover.
Ooh. Hey.
And I got it like a half a year ago. And I haven't been able to decide.
I always say I'm gonna do planners, and then I don't use my planner.
I love my planner.
I love planners.
Oh, it's so,
I mean,
it's
they're
the
nice. I
best.
just don't use them. I use a calendar. Like I keep stuff in a calendar, but I don't keep like my homework. I either don't do it or I remember to do it.
I made a planner of all the school stuff that I want to go to. So like, you used to have to find all the other music stuff that I can put on my
I know I
calendar.
can do marching band. There's only like three. There's only like three shows left.
Oh,
Do you, wait, are you free March 16th?
March 16th. Is that a Saturday?
Yeah, it's next
I
Saturday.
think so.
Because I say our home show is at Elk
It-
River is here.
oh,
You'll get to see all three groups. So our color guard, our drum line, and our horn line.
oh, that's cool.
Intense.
Yeah, next Saturday.
I'm excited.
If you wanna go. There's a morning show and an after
What?
show.
Yeah. Figured you could use a mental break.
Yellow. All of my college stuff next year, I'm realizing I'm getting new. I got a new backpack. Yellow. I'm getting a hydro flask and a hydro flask like coffee mugs for my
Ooh.
birthday. They're both yellow. I want to get a yellow planner cover. I like yellow. It's a good color.
And the yellow on your hoodie.
Exactly.
Oh
I
yeah,
was meant to go to this school.
I was gonna say I'm not going to college next year because I'm only a junior. So I'm going my senior year next year.
I was like, wait, Bart, you're not going to college? I think you need to go to college if you want to be a Dolphins player.
Yeah.
Probably.
I was looking at University of Minnesota.
Oh,
They have this marching.
Go to Rochester.
hey guys. Sorry, just remembered what one more plug.
Apply for the
What?
AP test March 11th.
No, another plug. Make sure for those of you that want to be signing up for the AP exam, again, remember we need to do that this week because Monday is our last day. So just again, little plug to make sure that we remember to be signing up for that.
I'm always the one that reminds you to apply for the AP
I
test.
don't. It's something you say that just like sparks it.
Say something that makes you remind
Yeah,
you to complete the
which is weird because you didn't even say anything about.
I said college, and he was like,
Oh, right, college credit. That's why.
I applied to
Because I want my kids to get their college credit.
I applied to Pine Tech, got my number one college, Pine Tech
Happy
Community College.
birthday.
We'll see if those even transfer.
Were the M&Ms worth it?
Oh yeah, the whole bag is gone. There's like four.
I told you they're super good.
So good. All the like that side of the classroom, we just kept passing back.
No, so yeah, like I'm not the biggest fan of peanut ones in general, but dark chocolate peanut,
Those are good.
yeah.
I like that.
Yes. Pretzel's the best.
What happened?
No, I have them. I haven't tried them yet. Are you still thinking of maybe study fifth, take a sixth? Perfect. I haven't had the heart to try them yet
I saw
because
the store and I was like, I don't know.
because their hot chili one they made, they had like this hot chili peanut. I'm like, that was gross. Do I really want to suffer and trying jalapeno?
One too. It was the jalapeno one. There was like two others.
Yeah, there's coconut
Yeah.
and there's toffee. Those two sound good. Jalapeno,
But you would try.
no, I'll try one and then probably throw the rest of the bag. Or pass it around, like, here, have it. Do away with this for me.
With the jar and don't tell.
It's like Russian roulette with M&Ms.
Yeah.
And we'll see which one you get.
Okay, chocolate roulette. You don't mess with chocolate.
What? Huh? Yes.
Do you just sign up for the AP exam? Like, do you pay for the AP exam just in the office?
They put it on rough track. So they look at that form, they go and they just apply a fee to your rough track.
All right.
Have a good day. Oh, yes, I did.
Good.
I messaged
Okay.
her last
It
night.
was like
I
I remember
remembered
you
at
on
like
Facebook, so I
9:30.
was like,
Yeah, I remember at like 9:30, but I was going to bed. I'm like, no,